In part 1 of the transcript, the conflict begins with Karen calling 911, accusing Eric of illegally closing a gate on his own property. She claims that the action is illegal and asserts that the gate is part of a shared access road, used by the HOA and other families in the community. Karen demands that Eric unlock the gate immediately, referring to what she calls a community agreement, even though the HOA has no legal jurisdiction over the land. Eric, standing firm behind the locked gate, remains calm and explains that the land is his and is not part of the HOA. He inherited the property from his grandfather, and the land was never included in the HOA's domain. Despite his clear explanation, Karen becomes agitated and insists that the land belongs to the community, in spirit, showing her refusal to respect Eric's legal rights. The situation escalates further when a second sheriff's vehicle arrives, with an officer informing Eric that there is a report of an illegal land seizure, which adds confusion to the already tense scene. This part sets the stage for a larger conflict between Eric and the HOA, especially Karen, who is determined to assert control over his land. The tension escalates quickly as Karen, still fuming, continues her crusade to convince the deputies that Eric's actions are illegal. She insists that she and the HOA have the right to walk through Eric's property as it supposedly belongs to the community. Eric calmly reiterates that the property is his and that the HOA has no jurisdiction over it. Despite his clear ownership, Karen refuses to back down, now shifting her narrative to accuse Eric of violating environmental agreements, claiming that Eric's actions are a threat to the neighborhood's harmony. As Karen continues her tirade, Eric notices the increasing absurdity of the situation. Karen goes further, recording the confrontation and broadcasting it as though she's the victim. This only serves to frustrate Eric, who knows he's in the right, yet is powerless to stop Karen's relentless legal threats and personal attacks. To make matters worse, Karen calls upon HOA legal resources, claiming that Eric's property has historically been part of the HOA's jurisdiction and accusing him of land theft. As the deputies check their tablets, the situation becomes even murkier when they mention an anonymous tip suggesting that Eric has forged ownership documents. The deputies are caught in the middle, unsure of how to proceed as Karen presses them with false accusations. When the second sheriff vehicle arrives, the tension grows even more. Eric is asked to step inside the vehicle for questioning regarding the land seizure. At this point, it's clear that Karen's intentions are no longer just about the gate. She's trying to manipulate the law to take Eric's land, using everything from fabricated claims of environmental violations to historical easements that never existed. Eric knows this is far from over, but he steels himself for the battle ahead. As Karen continues to push forward with her accusations, Eric realizes that this is just the beginning of a long and complex legal fight for his property. The deputies, still unsure of how to handle the situation, seem to be swayed by Karen's manipulative tactics. Eric can only hope that the truth will eventually prevail, but for now, it seems like Karen has the upper hand in the dispute. The next few days were oddly quiet, too quiet. Eric didn't trust it. Karen's retreat after the gate incident felt temporary, more like the calm before a storm than a surrender. So, he stayed alert. The reinforced security cameras picked up nothing out of the ordinary. That changed 3 days later. Eric was up early, feeding the horses, when he noticed a truck parked at the far end of the property, unmarked, dusty, and partially hidden behind some overgrown brush. At first, he figured it belonged to a hiker or a stranded traveler. But then he saw the camera lens peeking from the window. Without hesitation, Eric hopped on his ATV and rode straight toward it. As he approached, the truck peeled out onto the road, leaving a deep track of tire marks in the dirt. Eric managed to snap a photo of the license plate before it disappeared. Later that evening, Deputy Ross stopped by. "We traced that plate," he said. "Belongs to a contractor affiliated with Whitmore Consulting, Karen's sister's company." So the HOA was still watching him. Eric decided to go on the offensive. He contacted Lisa Hammond, a local investigative journalist with a reputation for exposing shady dealings. When he told her what was going on, she was all in. "Start documenting everything," Lisa said. We're going to shine a light on this. What Eric didn't expect, however, was the next escalation. 2 nights later, his dogs began barking furiously around 2 a.m. He ran out with a flashlight and found a trail of footprints near the eastern fence line, along with a bag full of printed notices. The papers read, "Notice of violation, unauthorized use of agricultural equipment, and immediate removal of non-compliant structures." All bore the HOA's letterhead and fake official stamps. Eric stared at the stack, jaw clenched. They were now trying to fabricate violations on paper and distribute them like legal warnings. The next morning, he made copies and filed another report with the sheriff's office. Lisa published a teaser article that afternoon, titling it, "When the HOA Crosses the Fence Line." The pressure was mounting, but Eric wasn't backing down. Not when he knew what was coming next would be bigger. Much bigger. Eric McConnell didn't sleep for 2 nights straight after the livestock theft. The footage showed everything: masks, a branded trailer, and a tattoo that made it crystal clear who was behind it, the HOA. Or more specifically, someone close to it. Marcus was livid. "This is felony level now," he muttered while reviewing the footage again with forensic software. "We've got trespassing, theft, and likely conspiracy." Eric didn't want revenge. He wanted justice. But more than that, he wanted proof, evidence so damning that not even the HOA board could sweep it under a rug. So they set a trap. Eric reached out to every rancher in the region who had clashed with the HOA. Many were hesitant. One man named Callahan, however, wasn't. He had been pushed off nearly 80 acres by the same tactics: a slow squeeze of fake violations, zoning manipulation, and harassment. "They think no one will fight back," he told Eric, voice raspy with age and bitterness. "Maybe you'll be the one who finally nails them." Together, with Marcus and Callahan's help, they devised a plan. Eric would stage an open event at his ranch, a barbecue, for the community. He posted the invite where the HOA could see it. On forums, in bulletins, and even slipped one into the HOA clubhouse mailbox. The bait was perfect. That night, they prepped. Marcus hid backup cameras inside fence posts, under solar panels, and even embedded motion-triggered flashlights in the barn. The team planted a decoy livestock trailer and left equipment out in the open, just enough to tempt another hit. All they had to do was wait. At 2:37 a.m., the trap snapped shut. 3 figures appeared on infrared footage, cloaked, gloved, slipping through the fence line like phantoms. They disabled one visible camera but didn't spot the backups. They crept toward the barn. One reached for the latch. Then, flash bang. Motion lights blazed on, sirens wailed, and black SUVs barreled through the front gate. Federal agents and county deputies swarmed the scene. The 3 figures scrambled in panic. One got tangled in barbed wire. Another tripped over feed buckets. The last sprinted, only to be taken down by Marcus himself. Masks were pulled off. One face Eric recognized instantly: Ethan Whitmore, Karen's nephew. "Game over," Marcus panted. Deputies cuffed the trespassers and took statements. One officer raised a brow. "Didn't think we'd catch 'em this clean," he said. But the best was yet to come. As the sun rose, Karen arrived in her SUV, still in a robe and curlers, screaming bloody murder. "My nephew was walking his dog." "There's no dog, ma'am," the deputy replied. Eric stepped forward, holding a fresh mug of coffee. "This is private land," he said calmly. "And your reign is over." Karen's face turned white as a ghost when 3 black sedans rolled up behind the deputies. Out stepped agents from Federal Land Protection. "We're here about the cybercrime connection," one of them said quietly. Karen collapsed into silence. And just like that, the tide shifted. The board wasn't just discredited. It was dismantled. But Eric knew one thing for sure: this war wasn't over. The very next morning, Eric stood on his porch, still absorbing the whirlwind from the night before. Karen's nephew Ethan had been caught red-handed with tools and gear used for trespassing. The agents had documented everything, and the sheriff's department officially filed criminal charges for attempted theft and property damage. But it was what came next that took things to another level. Ashley, a local reporter who had covered the initial HOA raids on Eric's ranch, returned with a film crew. She'd gotten wind of Ethan's arrest and the night raid through a tip, likely from one of the deputies. Cameras rolled as Ashley delivered a dramatic live report in front of Eric's barn, recapping the entire ordeal from gate disputes to arson attempts. HOA Karen's reign of terror may be coming to an end, Ashley said on air. But what we're learning now is that this wasn't just a land dispute, it was a coordinated campaign to push residents off their own land for redevelopment gain. The video exploded online. Within 24 hours, over 2 million people had viewed the clip. National news outlets began picking up the story. The hashtags #FreeTheRanch and #KarenGate began trending on Twitter and TikTok. People from across the country reached out. Ranchers in Texas. Homeowners in Florida. Suburban families in Arizona. All shared their own HOA nightmares and praised Eric for standing his ground. For the first time, Eric realized he wasn't just fighting for himself anymore, he was fighting for everyone who'd been bulldozed by petty power. Karen, meanwhile, went into damage control. She held a press conference on the steps of the Red Ridge HOA clubhouse, flanked by 2 remaining board members and a large banner that read, "Community over Chaos." With crocodile tears and trembling lips, she told the cameras, "This man has brought fear into our peaceful town. He's manipulating federal agents to target hardworking volunteers. And now, my family is being slandered for trying to protect our trails and traditions." She even had the nerve to hold up a photo of herself shaking hands with a county official, though viewers quickly pointed out it was from a completely unrelated ribbon-cutting event 5 years ago. But the internet wasn't buying it. Within hours, clips of Karen's press conference were turned into memes. Her denial was remixed into auto-tuned songs. TikToks mocked her for trying to sell a ranch she didn't own. Some creators dug up public property records that proved, yet again, that Eric's land had never been part of the HOA. The final nail in the coffin came from Lana Ruiz, an investigative journalist brought in by Marcus. She had been working behind the scenes, compiling documents, tracing financial records, and interviewing former HOA board members. On Monday, her article dropped, "The HOA That Tried to Steal a Ranch, a Deep Dive into the Red Ridge Scandal." It was brutal. The exposé revealed how Karen and her allies had misappropriated HOA funds, used fake permits to harass Eric, and even authorized surveillance drones and trespassing stunts, all funded by community dues. There was even a receipt trail showing money being funneled to Karen's sister's contracting company. And that's when the legal system struck again. County prosecutors, now under intense public pressure, opened a formal investigation into the Red Ridge HOA. Subpoenas were issued. Depositions scheduled. Karen was summoned for questioning, and this time, she had no clever words, no smug expression. Eric's lawyer, Frank, filed an additional lawsuit, a civil harassment and fraud suit naming Karen, her sister, Ethan, and 3 HOA board members. Damages sought, $1.2 million. But Eric wasn't finished. He'd had enough of fighting battles one at a time. So, with Marcus and Lana's help, he founded a nonprofit, Land First. Its mission: to defend private landowners from HOA abuse, provide legal templates and guidance, and raise funds for those being unfairly targeted. Within a week, Land First received over 100 requests for help. As for Karen, she went silent. No press, no appearances, no HOA meetings. Her house, once the staging ground for all her operations, was now surrounded by silence and shame. But Eric knew better than to assume it was over. If the war was quiet now, it only meant a bigger storm was brewing. He reinforced the fences, upgraded the camera systems, installed motion detectors and night vision drones. Not out of fear, but out of readiness. Because Karen might have fallen, but the network she belonged to? It was still out there. And Eric McConnell was just getting started. Just 2 nights after the explosive report went viral, Eric was awakened by the frantic barking of his dogs. The air smelled off, sharp, acidic, and unnatural. He rushed outside in flannel pants and boots, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other. That's when he saw it. Flames. Orange tendrils licking the side of his barn. Jake! Fire! He shouted, racing to the water pump. Jake, the retired army sergeant who had been staying on the property, was already moving, grabbing the fire extinguisher while Eric turned on the emergency hose. Together they fought back the fire, spraying the scorched siding, stopping it from reaching the livestock pen. When the flames died down and the smoke cleared, they found a melted plastic gas can near the fence line, and a dark trail of boot prints leading out toward the back of the property. Deputy Ross arrived 20 minutes later with a forensic team. This wasn't an accident, Ross confirmed grimly. The gas can had been deliberately punctured to leak faster. Whoever did this wanted the whole barn gone. Eric stared at the charred wood. His horses were safe, but the message was clear. This was personal. Ross and his team tracked the footprints all the way to the utility trail connecting to the back of the Red Ridge HOA clubhouse. Same trail Karen once claimed was part of a historic easement. It was no coincidence. This could have been a tragedy, Ross muttered. They're escalating. Eric had reached his limit. I'm done being polite, he said quietly. No more press conferences. No more warnings. This ends now. He contacted Wayne Garrison, the retired state land commissioner turned legal strategist who had been helping him since the wetlands claim. Wayne moved quickly. They filed a federal injunction barring the HOA from stepping foot on Eric's land under threat of felony prosecution. The injunction cited harassment, attempted arson, unauthorized surveillance, and property damage. But Eric wasn't finished. He called Lisa Hammond, the investigative journalist Lana had brought into the loop. Lisa had grown up in Texas Hill Country and had already been digging into suspicious HOA records. She had receipts, timestamps, maps, proof that the board had funneled money into Karen's sister's construction company and falsified HOA complaints. This isn't just a rogue board, Lisa told him. This is a small-town corruption ring hiding behind a community name. The article dropped the next morning. Exposed, the HOA empire that targeted a rancher, and lost. The fallout was immediate. National coverage. Outrage. Resignations. But Eric didn't have time to celebrate. That afternoon, a grainy night vision photo arrived at the sheriff's office. An anonymous envelope. It showed someone pouring gas near Eric's barn. The man in the photo? Mark Dempsey. HOA's treasurer. The very next day, he was arrested. And with that, the dominoes finally started to fall. Mark Dempsey's arrest sent shockwaves through Red Ridge. The man who once kept neat ledgers and smiled politely at community events was now in handcuffs, accused of attempted arson. But more than that, his confession unraveled everything. He admitted to pouring gasoline near the barn. Admitted he'd hoped the fire would scare Eric into leaving, making the land available for the HOA's redevelopment vision, a luxury complex Karen had secretly been pitching to investors. And with that confession came a subpoena storm. The county launched a formal criminal investigation. Every HOA board member was summoned. Bank accounts were frozen. The HOA clubhouse was locked down. And Karen, freshly free on bail from her earlier forgery charges, was dragged back to court. This time not as a witness, but as a central figure. In court, she looked nothing like the woman who once screamed through megaphones and waved fake maps. She was pale, drawn, and trembling as she sat beside her attorney, eyes darting across the crowded room. The judge didn't waste time. "We are here to determine whether the Red Ridge HOA board knowingly engaged in fraud, forgery, trespassing, and harassment against private landowner Eric McConnell." Lisa Hammond, the investigative journalist, was there too, front row, recording every moment. Eric sat calmly, binder in hand. His team, Wayne Garrison, Deputy Ross, and Cousin Jake, filled the bench behind him like a wall of quiet support. When Karen took the stand, her voice was hollow. "I didn't authorize the arson," she insisted. "I never told Mark to do it." "But did you encourage your board to deal with him quietly?" the prosecutor asked. Karen hesitated. "Ms. Whitmore," the judge pressed. She cracked. "Yes," she whispered. "I thought if we pushed hard enough, he'd leave. That's all I wanted." "And the maps?" "They were adjusted." "The complaints?" "I wrote some. To justify our actions." The courtroom gasped. Even some of her former board members looked stunned. The judge leaned back slowly. "You fabricated legal documents. Encouraged harassment. Authorized trespassing. And enabled criminal behavior on protected property." Karen lowered her head. The decision came quickly. The Red Ridge HOA was dissolved on the spot. Every restriction, violation, and complaint against Eric was vacated. His land was officially designated as a protected conservation property, beyond the reach of any HOA. But the true final blow came from the judge himself. This court refers all findings to the U.S. Attorney's Office for further prosecution. Fraud. Conspiracy. Attempted land theft. This board is no longer a governing body. It is now a case file. As Karen was led away once more. This time with no chance of walking free, Eric stood in the hallway, silent. "I just wanted to live in peace," he said quietly to Lisa. "And now," she replied, "you've made sure a whole lot of other people can too." The courtroom was quiet now. The HOA was no more, and Karen was behind bars. But for Eric, victory didn't feel like celebration, it felt like exhale after holding your breath too long. The following days brought a flood of gratitude. Neighbors, many of whom had been too afraid to speak before, came by the ranch. They brought pies, handshakes, letters, and stories about harassment, fake violations, and the quiet fear they'd lived under for years. It became clear that Eric's battle had been everyone's battle. He'd just been the one stubborn enough to stand his ground. Wayne helped push through the final step, an official historical designation for the land under the Agri-Conservation Heritage Protection Act. With that, the ranch became immune to future HOA annexations. No more forged maps, no more surprise land claims. Eric's land was safe, legally, permanently, and publicly. But instead of fencing himself in, Eric did the opposite. He opened the ranch. He rebuilt the scorched barn, this time sturdier and larger, with a sign over the entrance, "McConnell Ranch, a place to learn and heal." He transformed the old corral into a community equine center, where local kids could learn to ride. The pasture near the stream became a weekend picnic site. And every Saturday, Eric and Jake hosted self-defense classes for homeowners who wanted to learn how to stand their ground. Even Marcus, the federal agent who had once just dropped by, returned often, sometimes just to fish in the pond or help fix a fence. His presence alone made the ranch feel watched over. The new neighborhood committee, voluntary, informal, and transparent, invited Eric to speak at their first town gathering. Standing under the string lights of the old grain shed, Eric took the mic. "You all know what happened," he said. "You lived it too. This ranch isn't just mine, it's a reminder that power doesn't come from positions or clipboards. It comes from truth. And stubbornness." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "We didn't just end a corrupt board. We ended the silence." Applause followed. Some people cried. And for the first time in a long time, Red Ridge felt whole. But the story didn't stop at local fame. Lisa's coverage of the trial and the HOA takedown hit national news. Eric's story was featured on morning talk shows, podcasts, and property law forums. His fight became a symbol, for ranchers, for homeowners, for anyone who had ever been bullied by bureaucracy. People reached out from across the country asking for advice. Some just wanted to say thank you. And Eric, still the man who just wanted peace, kept doing what he always did, he worked the land. Only now, he did it knowing that beyond the fences and barns and oak trees, he had become something he never set out to be, a guardian, not just of property, but of principle. It was just past midnight when the camera pinged. Eric had been asleep, exhausted from fixing the last stretch of perimeter fencing that day. Buck's low growl at the foot of the bed pulled him from his dreams. The screen on the nightstand blinked, motion detected, northwest fence line. He was out of bed in seconds. By the time he threw on his boots and grabbed the flashlight, Jake was already outside, shotgun slung over his shoulder. The two moved quickly through the dark, cutting across the barnyard and into the tall grass. Near the fence, a small flicker of light danced. "Campfire?" Jake whispered. "No," Eric muttered, heart pounding. "That's flame." They crept closer, and then they saw it. Someone had piled dry brush and gas-soaked rags against the new timber fence. A fuse, just a twisted line of cloth, ran from the pile and had already started to burn. They had seconds. Jake lunged, stomping out the flame, smoke curling around his boots. Eric dropped to his knees, smothering the embers with his jacket until everything went dark again. Silence. Then from beyond the trees, the crunch of retreating footsteps. Fast. Too fast to follow. "Cowards," Jake spat. But Eric's face was calm. Not surprised, prepared. He looked at the half-burned fuse, the soaked rags, the calculated placement. This wasn't vandalism. It was a message. "You think they'd try again?" Jake asked, scanning the shadows. Eric stood slowly, brushing soot from his hands. "No," he said. "This wasn't a try. This was a warning." They walked back in silence. In the morning, Eric reviewed the camera footage. The face was obscured. The frame was shaky. But something stood out, a silver watch, glinting under moonlight. A brand only one person on the former board had worn. He forwarded the footage to Wayne and the sheriff. It wasn't over. Not yet. But it was getting sloppy. And that meant they were getting scared. Eric sipped his coffee on the porch later that day, eyes on the ridge. They could come with fire, or threats, or lies, but this land was no longer just his. It was watched. It was protected. And he would never stand alone again.